Thanks for making it despite the strikes. My name is Magali. I lead the UK, Europe, Middle East and Africa policy team at WISE. Now, I joined WISE about 10 years ago, and I joined for a very simple reason. When I transferred my money over from Belgium when I moved to London, I got caught out by very high hidden fees, maybe like some of you as well, I don't know. But it basically meant those hidden fees were hidden in incredibly crappy exchange rates. And I only found out how much I actually paid when it was too late. Honestly, it was so frustrating, and it really stuck with me. So not long after, I joined WISE. Not because I wanted to join a fintech company, but because I wanted to solve a real problem that I'd experienced myself, an annoying problem. Now that was back in 2016, but let me take you on a little bit of a fintech journey. You might want to think about the landscape that fintechs are in today in the UK by framing it with a very simple question. Why did so many important fintechs start here in the first place? Because that wasn't an accident. When WISE started back in 2011, London was so obvious. It was an absolute no-brainer. There was so much excitement here. It just made sense to start a fintech company back here. And that's partially, and maybe here I'm showing my age, I don't know if you remember, but back in 2011, we had the Silicon Roundabout. That was London's way of competing with Silicon Valley. It was this startup hub around the Old Street Roundabout. I don't think anyone uses that phrase anymore, but it really stuck with me, and it really was the symptom of what was happening back then. It was pretty exciting. So WISE got started, but there was an entire generation of fintech companies that got started roughly around the same time. You had companies like Monzo, Starling, Revolut. They were all symptoms of the same type of thing, that the UK had created a landscape where it was possible to build a fintech company, where it was possible to challenge the status quo and to push incumbents to improve. I think that was pretty crucial. And there was just all of this energy. And that's why we all got started here today. But that energy was only part of the thing that we needed. What we also needed was people who were just a bit frustrated with how things were. And I think WISE is a pretty good example of people being frustrated with how things were done. Now, our two founders were two Estonians. One was the first employee of Skype, an Estonian company. So he got paid in euros, but he lived in London, so he needed pounds to pay for his day-to-day spending. The other one was a Deloitte consultant who got paid in pounds, but had a mortgage back in Estonia. So he needed euros. Now, instead of paying the sky-high bank fees that I did when I first transferred my money over from Belgium to London, they just started swapping money between themselves at the real exchange rate, the one that you see on Google. And then they told their friends, and their friends told their friends, and the rest is history, right? I think that's just such a very London kind of origin story. It's two international people, a cross-border problem, and just a broken system hidden in plain sight. That's just very powerful. And WISE is definitely not unique in that scenario. You know, I've already spoken about Monzo, Revolut, and Starling. They were all part of this exact same ecosystem. The ecosystem that allows us to just challenge things, to change how things are done. And I'll give you a WISE example that basically shows how we can challenge the rules when they don't make sense for us. So back in 2018, up until then, you had to be a bank to make payments. So you could only make those payments if you had a banking license. It's a bit strange, but fine, let's go with it. So in order to make payments, what I really mean by that is that you also get access to the underlying payment infrastructure, to the pipes. That means to a settlement account directly with the Bank of England. Now at Wise we thought, why on earth do you have to be a bank to make payments? Why can't you be a payments company to make payments? That just didn't make any sense to us. So we challenged the status quo, and lo and behold, in 2018, Wise became the first fintech company to get access to a settlement account directly with the Bank of England. And that had a huge impact on our customers. Our customers had payments that were 20% cheaper all of a sudden, that got 98% faster all of a sudden, all through this one change. And I think that's powerful, right? Because it shows that UK policymakers listen. They listen to what doesn't work. They allow fintech companies to just challenge the rules when they don't make sense for companies to grow and scale here. So I think that's truly testament to how the UK enables the system to work better and to allow companies to grow. Now, we are helping change the ecosystem, but I think that's why fintech companies have been so successful here. It's why we've got stats like the one behind me, where we have now 60% of SME lending that goes through UK fintech companies. And yesterday I was at another fintech conference where somebody live updated me that this stat is actually now 68%, which just shows the pace of change when it comes to fintech. We just keep growing and growing and growing. You've got success stories like Monzo, who now have 15 million customers here in the UK. That's basically 1 in 4 people here in the UK banking with Monzo. And it would be amiss of me not to mention that nearly 5% of the world's money now flows via Wise. That growth is pretty powerful. But I think people have been a little bit down on the UK. The mood music has become a little heavier. People are wondering whether the center of gravity has maybe shifted elsewhere. Economic growth is a little sluggish. The US maybe looks bigger, bolder, louder. So people are checking in whether the UK is still all it claims to be. But I think we may be risking confusing mood and reality here. Because I think if you look beneath the headlines, there's actually still so much that is there. Many of the same ingredients you need to build a successful fintech ecosystem definitely still exist. Now, that first ingredient is talent. The UK has an abundance of people who understand both tech and finance. In fintech, you don't just need code and engineers. You need engineers who are able to work creatively with product people, with compliance folks, with risk, operations, design, analysts, and so on. You need people who understand how the money moves, but you also need people who have experienced the problem firsthand, who understand the friction of the problem that they're trying to solve. And I think you also need international people. International people with an international mindset who can help companies they work for or the companies they're building look outward from the get-go. So you don't just have domestic products that work within one single country. You work across borders. That's just part of the success formula. And the UK still has that. Now, the second one is capital. The UK is still a pretty big hub for VC money, with over £20 billion invested in 2025 alone. That's more than the next 5 European countries combined. So that's still pretty massive, and that's helped power offshoots from successful companies like Wise, like Revolut, like Monzo, because all of these companies now essentially have a mafia of alumni that power and build new companies like investment firm Lightyear, like energy supplier Fuse, or like personal finance app Plum. And there are so many more of these types of stories. Successful companies breed successful companies, and that attracts cash. So as long as that's still here, nothing's going to change. And then the last one, and bear with me because I think you'll think this is slightly more boring, is regulatory credibility. The UK has been a pioneer, in my view at least, when it comes to financial services policy making. They've taken some pretty brave and pioneering decisions over the years. And a lot of what has been decided here has been exported to other countries. And that's slowed down a little bit over the years, but that's because the UK has a first mover disadvantage. All of these pioneering decisions that the UK made, other countries have copied them. And those other countries are now building bigger and better on top of the foundations that the UK created. And so the UK is maybe slightly lagging behind, but there is a shift towards more pragmatic policy making all over again. The UK is helping shape some of the emerging technologies in financial services, and yes, that includes buzzwords like AI and stablecoins and so on, but it's also something much more fundamental, this shift towards consumer-first and outcomes-focused regulation. And I think that's pretty important because that credibility, it just means that countries continue to look for inspiration and, frankly, validation for UK policymakers. They look to copy what the UK will be doing next. And I think that's pretty hard to find elsewhere. So as long as that's still here, that'll be another key ingredient. So I think all in all, the ingredients that we need for a successful fintech ecosystem are definitely still here. We've got loads of talent. We've got deep pools of money, investment, capital, and we've got a robust regulatory framework. Now, all of that just means that I am maybe slightly more optimistic than what the mood music is showing us today. I think everything is still here to continue building that core fintech ecosystem. So while everyone else is a little bit gloomy and it's a bit fashionable to be down on the UK, I actually think there's a lot that's really going for it, or that's continuing to go for it, rather. So I do think that the future is still relatively bright. Now, on that positive note, I want to say thank you, and hopefully see you next time.